Welcome to the Rich Relationship Podcast with Gil
and Renee, where amazing things happen. Our goal is to help build, repair, and restore healthy relationships.
Our primary focus is on the marriage relationship. However, the topics are applicable to the relationships that we value most. Remember, we're stronger together.
Let's grow.
Episode 11, Who Told You That?
Yeah, who told you that?
Discovering your personal identity. You know, when we were talking about this topic, Genesis 3 came to mind. And if you're not familiar with the Bible, is basically God said those exact words. Who told you that to Adam and Eve after they had been tricked by the enemy?
Mm-hmm. So
that's where the identity really started, with a lie. When you really think about it, it's somebody telling you something else than what you were already told.
Or trying to help you to get something that you already have.
That's a good one. And we're going to be talking about that next, coming up on the Rich Relationship Podcast with Gil and Renee.
Episode 11. And if you don't know who you are, you don't know your identity is more than just what you look like. It's more than your gender. It's more than your birth order. But it's all of those things. And so understanding, I think identity is something that we have to learn to understand and accept. And it's something that is unique to you. God gave us all an identity. And along with that identity, He gave us a purpose. But you can have a job and it not be your purpose. And you can be operating in your purpose and not really still understand who you are. Because sometimes what we do becomes who we are. And what you do
is not who you are.
Is not who you are. But like when you begin to use your occupation as an identifier of who you are, then that's something that can change. The things that really define you and the things that make up your identity are your character, the things that can't change, your race, your gender, the things that are absolute were preordained. There's things about your identity that God already, just like your phone, He hardwired it. There's some things on your phone that are just there no matter what. And so it's important that we understand in relationships, when you don't really know your identity, that can begin to affect how you, and even talking to Dr. White last week when she was talking about money and money conversations and how your parents were and how all these things can imprint you, but they don't have to define you. Mm-hmm. And we have to learn how to really, like we talk about the journey inward. A part of that journey inward is, who are you? Not based on what somebody told you, but who are you based on what you believe about you? What are the things? Because even in the poem, Beauty Beyond the Mirror, our beauty, our identity is not just the way we look. It's our DNA. It's things that, it's our relationship with God. It's from the things that we really had nothing to do with. And so I believe that journey inward begins with us trying to really understand us. And I think the better we really understand who we are, not just what we do, but why we do it, it'll begin to help us in relationships. It'll make us better equipped. Because if I know who I am, then I can accept who you are. But because we don't know who we are, and I talk to people all the time, especially when I was doing here, that they felt like other people were the problem. Other people aren't the problem. We are. There are so many Bible verses that talk about who we are in Christ and finding our identity. And for those people who listen to the podcast and you say, well, I don't believe in God and I don't believe in the Bible, but everyone has an origin. Mm-hmm. Everyone has a belief system. And whether we realize it or not, a part of our identity is not just a reflection in the mirror, it's also our belief system.
Yeah. Even if you don't follow Christ or any other religion or anything like that, that is still a belief system.
It is. Because I believe is
to believe.
Actually, it takes more faith not to believe
than
it does to believe. But that's a whole nother topic.
Right.
But so we are not going to go into that, to a debate about it. But it's just a matter of understanding that our identity is so crucial to us thriving in relationships. Because we talk about, we mentioned it, kind of briefly, the long journey inward. People probably go, what is that? Well, what do you do? What does that mean? What does that look like? And so that's why I thought that this would be a really good time after Dr. White's amazing show on
awesome.
money, and she did such an amazing job of making it simple and applicable and helping us understand. So if you guys haven't heard the episode,
it was episode 10.
Episode 10.
Dr. Cosette White talking about finances and
money.
But the one thing that she did mention in that is how money can be tied to people's identity, or people can tie or have their identity being layered in what they possess.
Right.
And what you possess is not who you are.
No. It is not. And so as I begin to really think about it, and for me, because I dealt with women on a personal basis for so many years, I think about something as simple as the first thing I really wrote was Beauty Beyond the Mirror. And it's basically a devotional. And it's basically talking about there are so many women that I would turn them around to the mirror and they couldn't look at themselves. And so that began to help me to understand that that's the starting point. Or like you and I, we talk about how when you're talking to someone and they can't look you in their eyes,
it's an indicator.
Those are indicators, and so we want to make sure that we don't leave any areas left
unexamined
or unexplained. So when we say take the long journey inward, a part of that is really nailing down what is identity. What is my identity? Is it just the way I look? Is it my family? Is it my job? Is it my title? Is it my clothing size? Is it the language that I speak? And
for guys, it could be, what do I do for a living? What do I drive? What do I wear? Those are all things that we externally use to validate a part of our identity. And
right.
That can be just as hazardous. And the reason why we are talking about this is because in relationships, whether you're in a marriage relationship or just getting started in one, you have to go into it knowing where you are at in the relationship, because that's going to matter and it's going to come into play sooner or later. So that journey that we continuously talk about on the podcast is always do some self-examination. That is so vitally important to a healthy relationship, that you are always looking at yourself not from a self-ish standpoint, but one that you can be better towards the relationships that you have, with your spouse, with your significant other, or even with your children or anybody you're in a relationship with. Because the more you know about yourself and you have a real good understanding of where you are, and sometimes where some of the origin things in your life come from or how they got there, help you to understand where you are today.
And one of the things that when you look at it psychologically, some of our addictive behaviors come from our flawed identity of ourselves. Some of the reasons why we're abusing or being led by our appetites is because we're trying to put what we are in the place of who we are. So many times it's easier to say, well, I just don't know what I am, versus saying, I don't know who I am. And there's a difference between what you are and who you are, and really kind of understanding. So one of the things that in just praying and researching, one of the things that I really looked at and I wrote down was that we are all born with an identity. God has given us all an identity. It's our job to learn and understand what it is over time.
And I even think about from the standpoint of even after you're born and then when you're starting out in life, you could have situations and circumstances, and maybe you didn't have the best home life, and maybe you had a great home life. It doesn't matter, where the first instant of someone telling you who you are probably started with your parent or even whoever that significant person was in your life that raised you to start telling you who you are. And some of it could be good.
Right. And some of it could be bad.
Right. And so you're going to take those things and it's going to be engrafted into you at such a very early age that you're going to remember it and you're going to act on it.
Right.
And that's so important that you look at those things, because you come here as a blank slate.
Yes.
And from the time you take that first breath and after you start living life, things are getting imprinted on you. And we're going to talk a little bit about that when we talk about the locus of control and those things,
Yes.
internal and external, and give you some indicators. And because we always want to give you information that can help you on that journey inward, that we can help you to recognize some of the things that can be indicators or road maps or road markers to saying, so that's why I do what I do,
Yes.
or why I think the way I think. Because the more you know, I love G.I. Joe, and knowing is half the battle.
You have to apply it. You know, I think about my own journey inward when I first began to realize, because I don't know if I may have mentioned it before. I'm the oldest child. My parents were both drug addicts, so I automatically, because I was the oldest child, was a lot more responsible, and I had parents that I had to parent. And so I remember always feeling responsible for taking care of people. And it wasn't until we were probably in Louisiana, and we were probably in our 20s, late 20s, when God started to show me, well, what do you like? What is Renee like? What's important to you? Because, you get into these roles,
yeah.
and you get rolled into these roles, and sometimes it could really get you off course. And so I had to stop and say, what do I like? I need to get to know me. And I remember when I was younger, one of the things that I understood was that no one could love me until I loved me. And a part of loving me is I have to know myself. I have to understand myself. I have to know my strengths and my weaknesses and my shortcomings. And the things about me that are quirky, the things about me that I need to change, the things about me that are going to stay that way, because it's just basically the way God designed me.
Right.
And so I remember that journey, and I remember being in Louisiana. I remember God just basically separating me from everyone. I mean, not from you and our family, but I'm saying as far as all my girlfriends.
A lot of external.
All the external voices, and, and just sat me down to be still and be quiet and to really start to ask myself some real hard questions. What's important to you? What are the things what are your I got tos?
And, and that can be challenging even today, even as we're in latter parts of our lives, where you've had roles as husband, wife,
business owner,
all the roles that you may have, you take on those responsibilities. And if you're trying to embrace the responsibilities that you have, you can start losing parts of who you are. And things
really never develop.
And one of the things you asked me a couple weeks ago, you were like, what do you like to do? And I literally had nothing to say. I had to literally think about it. I was like, man, I know I used to do a lot of stuff. I used to bowl. I used to play racquetball.
Fly kites?
I had a kite flying hobby, stunt kites and those types of things. And I had all these hobbies. And it wasn't because I didn't have the responsibilities. Because being a dad and military and all those things have always been there for a long time. But I still started, nobody took it away from me. I more or less gave it up.
Right.
For me, I looked at it as more, I felt I was prioritizing things that were more important than maybe some type of activity or some hobby for something that was more important, like my family, And I know guys, and I'm not faulting them for this, but you can't let things that you like to do externally take priority over the things that are your responsibilities. It's great to have hobbies and things that you do, but when those things take priority, then you have to maybe start not second guessing, but you have to start taking that self-examination, evaluating it and saying, whoa, is this getting out of control a little bit? Or what is it that's making me? Do I want to escape? Do I want to just get away? Or do I want to not have the responsibility? That's just as important, and that's a part of that journey.
As I was looking up and researching, one of the things, let's talk about some of the things that can cause problems in our relationships. Low self-esteem. When we think about low self-esteem, I think naturally we automatically assume that it would only be one gender. But low self-esteem is a poor sense of self-worth. It's a poor sense of who we are. And it's that we don't believe that we're valuable. We don't believe that we play a key role in people's lives, and that the things that we bring to environments are valuable.
The time in our show, we're going to take a little break from the topic because sometimes it can seem like it's a little heavy.
Breathe, everybody.
But we're going to say thank you, because we've been getting feedback from listeners out there, and we appreciate all the responses and questions that have been coming in, and even just the feedback that we've been getting. And we take those things not as criticisms, but as things that we can take and use and embrace and try to get better at this, and we welcome them. So you wanted to say thank you to some people. What did you go ahead?
I'm just grateful. Again, I always say I'm grateful for this platform, because in this whole new world of being author, speaker, it is such a blessing to have a place where you can take what God has put into your heart and not have to have someone else's permission
or validation
to do it. And so we're not doing this because we're perfect or we have it all together. We're doing it because we want to give back. We want to take what God has put in our lives and share with other people. So I'm just grateful to be able to do that. Thank you to all of our guests who come on our show and their investment of time, and they take time out of their schedule and they come on and they're interviewed. We're going to be going to interview some guests in Detroit. We're excited about that. And so we just want to say thank you. Thank you, God, for this platform. Thank you for all the amazing people who listen. For those of you who listen and comment, and even for those of you who don't, thank you. Thank you for being a part of our community.
So at this time, we're going to go into Got Wisdom.
God question. It's time. It's that time. It's that time.
So Got Wisdom, Got Questions. Which one you want to do first this week?
What did we do first last week?
I don't know.
Okay, let's do Got Wisdom.
Okay, Got Wisdom.
Our Got Wisdom came from Carmen in Montgomery, Alabama.
Right here in Alabama.
And her wisdom was, we have to, as parents, make sure that our children know that they have a voice, that they feel comfortable sharing their voice, and they know how to share their voice. And what does that mean? That means that their views, their ideas, their opinions, even when they're little kids, that begins to shape your identity. I think about reading, because, we read a lot of Focus on the Family, and it talked about letting your kids pick the room color, their paint.
Something that doesn't matter.
Yeah, letting them pick their pajamas, because you're teaching them how to make decisions. So I thought that was great wisdom.
It is, and while you were when you were saying that, I thought about it happens kind of in line with this conversation that we're talking about, this topic, because as a child, that's probably that first imprinting, that self-efficacy that
what
we're
I
talking
think
about.
matters.
Yeah, that parents are investing in children and hopefully investing the positive side.
And it's not always easy to let them make choices.
And it's not always easy to be a parent. So we know that.
It's not. And so I thought that was great wisdom from Carmen. So thanks for that wisdom, Carmen.
And then the question that we got is from Joey Sway in Camp Springs, Maryland. I'll let you start answering this question. How do you enter back into a relationship after having trust issues and not hold a grudge?
Well, that is, love is unconditional. Trust and respect are earned. I would start by saying that. And I would say that when someone, I don't think that you should throw the baby out with the water. People are going to hurt you. They're going to betray you. They're going to disappoint you. And so you have to go into relationships knowing that that's a part of the package. Like on the menu, trust, that's going to be, it's going to happen. But you have to ask yourself, is this relationship worth the work that it's going to take in order to build the trust again? And the person that broke the trust is the person that's responsible for building the trust. It's not for you to try to get them to trust you. They have to be working. And that's how you'll know if you should proceed forward. If the person who broke the trust is the one pursuing and trying to build the trust, then you know that their heart has changed.
Right.
But you should not be trying to get someone to trust you that they broke the trust. And the way that you keep from holding grudges is that you understand that we all miss it.
You're human.
The same measure we measure out, it's going to, and I know that sounds very, very
Cliche
elementary, but
simple.
it's that simple. I want to give what I want to receive, and I always say I'm responsible for how I treat people, not for how they treat me.
Yeah.
So the greatest way to not walk in unforgiveness is to give people grace.
Mm-hmm. And that's important as you have relationships, because even from a very early age, you're going to have problems. And when that trust is broken, like you just described, you're going to have to, again, decide, do I want to reconcile?
And there's some, we talked about it before, there's some situations where you should always forgive, but you shouldn't always reconcile.
Mm-hmm.
There are some scenarios, sexual abuse, physical abuse, you can forgive, but you may not want to reconcile.
Sure.
And we talked about that in one of the other episodes. You can forgive, but there's a difference between forgiveness. Forgiveness and reconciliation don't always coexist.
No, they do not.
And so we're not saying that if someone is sexually abused you or physically abused you, you should forgive them and reconcile. You should forgive everyone, no matter what the case. But reconciliation has to be, again, love is unconditional. Trust and respect have to be earned.
Well, and you said that key there is the person who violated the trust has to not beg, not grovel or anything, but you have to see a very concerted effort on their part to
a repentant heart, a heart that's sorry.
You should see a real change in behavior. If they haven't changed that behavior, they probably haven't really changed at all.
And it's probably best not to move forward, because what made you walk away before is going to probably reemerge.
Yes. So we thank you for Got Wisdom and Got Questions.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. And if you ever want to send it in, you know that you can reach us at our Gmail account, which is richrelationships.us@gmail.com, or you can actually go to our website at richrelationshipsus.com.
Yes. Great job, babe.
Gil and Renee Beaver's over 30-year relationship is the genesis for the Rich Relationship Podcast, which is designed to empower individuals with the tools, principles, and the community needed to unpack ourselves, our past, and our preconceived notions associated with relationships.
Let's get empty and grow together so that our lives will be filled with love and healthy, rich relationships. Now let's go into our show. You know, one of the things that I had to really start to look at when I was going on this journey inward was, what are some of the things that can be a problem in relationship in regards to my self-esteem, my value of myself? And, you know, one of the big things was for me that I had very low self-esteem. And when your self-esteem is low, you don't see that what you bring to relationships, to your workplace, to your family are valuable. That's something that the only person that can really work that out is you.
You know, it's funny when you said that, as you talked about having low self-esteem. I remember when we were dating, how I recognized that, but while you may have said you had low self-esteem, I had low self-confidence. Mm-hmm. And I masqueraded it by being overly confident or trying to be or put on those airs like I'm good. You know, right. I'm good to go in this particular area or whatever it can be. And it's basically the same thing.
It is. It's not seeing the value in yourself. And another problem that you can have in relationship, and this was something that I thought that I really never really thought about, was you can have a low self-efficacy. Mm-hmm. And that was something I was like, wow, that's really powerful.
Right.
You know, it's important that we even understand, well, what is it? What is efficacy? It's understanding that when you fail, you're not a failure.
Right.
And when we have low efficacy, we are more likely to fall into the trap of seeing failure as our go-to versus realizing that we all fail and that we're going to get up. And so a person with low self-efficacy would be someone who would consider failure their go-to. A person with high self-efficacy would be someone who sees failure as a part of the process. Mm-hmm. And so when I looked at that, I'm like, wow, you know, that's powerful.
So as a person with low self-esteem, can you have, or do you think you had high self-efficacy?
I had low self-esteem but high self-efficacy, because I believed that I could accomplish whatever I put my mind to. And it's funny, and I think about even when Aaron was growing up and even dealing with all the cheerleaders, you can have high self-esteem and low body image. Mm-hmm. And so there is not just one size fits all. And so
Right.
that's why it's important to look at this in layers and say, what are the areas that are my growth areas? What are the areas that are my strength areas? Because you may have high self-esteem and low self-efficacy. You may have a poor body image and good self-esteem. And so it's important that you look at all that. And then, then you have
the locus of control.
Yes.
When you think about those things, and we're going to dive a little bit more into it, but when we talk about, they go hand in hand.
They do.
High self-efficacy, you can have, that's probably going to be someone who has a strong internal locus of control. Mm-hmm. An internal locus of control basically is a person who, well, we were just talking about locus of control, and me with my notes.
Yeah, I even have graphs this time, babe. I'm following your footsteps.
So it's basically divided into two categories. You can have internal and external locus of control. If a person has internal locus of control, they attribute their success to their own efforts and their own abilities. A person who expects to succeed will be more motivated to be more likely to learn. The internal says things like, I know it's up to me. I have to learn how to become better or do better in a particular situation. They have a more positive outlook on situations, and they usually make statements that are more focused and intent. That's someone that has an internal. External locus of control attributes their success to fate.
Yes.
Or they're lucky.
Or everyone else. They're the victim.
Yeah, it's less likely to make the effort and the need to learn something.
Like you said, if they don't pass a class, it's because the teacher was hard and they didn't like me. Mm-hmm. They're setting me up for failure. Those are people with an external locus of control.
Right. And they attribute things, and they may say things like, it's too hard to succeed these days. It's not my fault.
Right.
It's too late for me. And you think about it, though, it's neither good or bad in these particular situations, because
and we vacillate.
These are just variables
in some
life.
areas.
Yeah, they're
right.
variables in life that happen, and some of them are really truly beyond our control. You can be, I won't say a victim of circumstance, but circumstances can happen, but you don't have to be a victim. You can just look at it and say, okay, it happened. I'm going to go ahead and move on, or take an internal locus of control perspective about a situation. And they also think about they're powerless to do anything about it.
Yeah. And those are the things. That's why we need people in our lives who are not like us. If everyone in your sphere of influence is just like you, then you probably need to get a new sphere of influence, because we're going to grow and we learn the most from each other, from other people. Mm-hmm. And so when you think about self-esteem and self-efficacy and locus of control, those are all things that can shape our personality, but it's just a matter of being aware of them and knowing what they are. When we feel ourselves focusing more on what we can't do and all the negative things, the Bible says whatever things are good and pure and lovely and of good report, that's how you begin to learn because like you said, there are some things, like you don't get to choose which family you're born in. Your family of origin, you have nothing to do with that. Mm-hmm. But what you can do is you can begin to say, how do I take the things that I like what Dr. White said, you don't know what card you're going to be dealt, but you have to play accordingly. Mm-hmm. And so don't use it as an excuse, but use it as a learning opportunity or as a tool to say, how do I take what's happened to me and not erase it, but how do I learn from it? How do I get better from it? And so a part of our identity has got to be looking at, our self-esteem and looking at, our belief system, and all of those things make up our identity. And the stronger our identity is, and when our identity is rooted in our Creator, it becomes unshakable. And that's one of the things that I talked about in Beauty Beyond the Mirror, was that when our identity is in Christ, it far surpasses DNA, it surpasses education, it surpasses beauty, it surpasses all those things that can fade away. It's because our identity ultimately is in the God who created us. And if he created us, he then has a plan for us. And all those little things about our self-esteem and our self-efficacy and our locus of control have to be sifted through the bigger plan that God has. And that's for us to be in healthy relationships, to see ourselves as he sees us and not the way. And that's what I had to do. I had to stop listening to all, when I say who told you that, so many times we allow what other people say about us to mean more to us than what we think about ourselves. And so through that journey of examining my heart and really saying, Lord, who am I? I began to look at scriptures like, you know, you are the head and you're not the tail. God has given you everything pertaining to life and godliness. God created you and has written your name in the palm. All of those scriptures that affirmed me versus listening to the tapes in my head. You're stupid, you're dumb, you're never going to be anything. You can't allow what someone else says who's struggling with their own identity to mask your identity or to permanently damage your identity.
It's almost like you're stuck in the middle, you know, between, you have to make a decision. You know, if you've had bad things said to you or done to you or imprinted upon you, and then just like you said, you read in the Bible or you get your spirituality or your motivation from other sources, you hear those things and you have to decide, which one am I going to believe?
Exactly.
I'm going to decide. I'm going to say, you know what? I know that was said to me, but I'm not going to stand on that. I'm not going to accept that. I'm not going to embrace it. I'm going to look for something alternative.
Right.
I'm going to rewrite that story. And that's definitely within your power to say, you know what? That was then. This is now.
You can't control what happened, but you can't control what you do with it.
Right. That's the next step. You know, anytime you have a failure or something that come upon you, you have to say, you know what? Okay, it happened. What did I learn from it? And what am I going to do now and move forward?
Yeah. And a part of, like you said, we have to examine the things that happened to us. We have to sit back and say, what could I have done different? How can I take what has happened to me and learn from it, teach other people from it, and not repeat the same cycle of self-centeredness? Because, you know, it's natural for us to be self-centered. As children see their parents as the object of their affection. Our parents serve the children. And so it's important that we understand that that's a part of being a child. I remember talking to my grandparents, asking them about what is when you're an adult. And Gil took it another step further, and is that you're an adult when you care about other people more than yourself. You can take care of yourself without the help of someone else.
Even the financial assistance of someone else.
And that your life impacts other people in a positive way. And it's not one of those things.
It's all
those things
simultaneously.
And that's a journey.
It is.
So becoming, as the kids call it, adulting, it's a journey. And so a part of that journey is really knowing who you are and who you are not, and what are the things about you that you are proud about, and what are the things about you that you know you need to really have someone be praying with you about, or at least bring it out. You know, I always say, you don't keep secrets, they keep you. We got to talk these things out. We got to have people in our sphere of influence that we can be transparent with so that we can get better.
And that you can trust. You know, it's always, you have to have that safe place or that safe person or persons to go to. And if you do, you have them, that's great.
Yes.
And if you don't, you can always reach out to us.
Yeah, that's why we're here. That's the whole purpose of the Rich Relationship Podcast. It's to create an environment,
a community
where people can get back to building relationships with other human beings.
Because the honest truth is, nobody has it perfect and nobody has it all together. Nobody has the answers. But you know that they say one of the ninth wonder of the world is compounded interest.
Yes.
So you think about that, not from a financial sense, but you think about the compounding equity. Relationships. The more you have, the more people that are in your life that you bring into your life in a sphere of influence, the more you're going to be exposed to.
Right.
And the more positivity that you're going to have in your life that you can embrace, and then you can take that and put it on to someone else and pass it along.
Yeah, and which is a good thing.
So we're talking about Who Told You That on the Rich Relationship Podcast with Gil and Renee, talking about personal identity.
Discovering and accepting it. You know, I'm always writing things down. And one of the things that I wrote down, because I think a part of the human, there are certain things about us as human that are just a part of us being human. And one of the things that I wrote down was that it's not until we've had enough can Jesus be enough. And I think that so many times our identity gets so filled with things that really don't make us who we are. I was talking to Robin and she said something I thought was very powerful. She said there's a difference between what you can do and what you are created to do. And so many times our identity gets crowded out with the American dream and things and cars and purses and houses and
Stuff.
all of those things
All
become your life. And you're left empty of the thing that matters the most, and that's relationships. Mm-hmm. And so I think about just even the transition from owning a salon and being a salon owner, being an entrepreneur my whole life, to moving to Alabama, and God having to really show me how much of my identity was tied up in my ability to generate income. Mm. And it's taken almost 5 years for God to get that out of my heart where I can begin. Because, you know, Gil's always said, Renee, you work because you want to, not because you have to. And I love him and I appreciate that. And that's a great thing to have resonating in your heart. But when you're raised by females and they tell you, don't let a man,
have your own.
You got to have something of your own. I didn't realize that still was echoing in my heart. Mm-hmm. And so you may be fine in one area and in another area. And that's the whole thing. That's why life is a journey. God will show you the real you if you ask him. Mm-hmm. But you have to be willing to own it, evaluate it, and say, is that really me? And so you can move on. And so to me, I think about sometimes as, you know, as women, as men, we find our identity in our ability to generate income. But at the end of the day, what really matters is the quality of our relationships. And I think about even like doing this is something we probably would have never done because we had so many other things that crowded out the quality things like this because we're pursuing, quote unquote, the American dream.
Right. And you said that because when we, even just with the podcast, we have to take time and talk and communicate mm-hmm. and revisit some things. Mm-hmm.
And dig up some stuff.
And when you revisit and dig up some stuff, sometimes it can be challenging, not to the point where it's causing new problems, because if you dig up something and it hasn't been dealt with, that's probably been unresolved, and that'll be a good time to deal with it. But thankfully, we haven't come across any of that, but we still have discussions. And even though we've been together as long as we have, we still talk like it's new. Your friend was jokingly saying, what are y'all doing just sitting around looking at each other, just talking? And that was funny to me. But you know what? You probably wasn't too far from the truth, because we were probably sitting down just at the table. And what you guys hear in these podcasts, this is how we actually are. When we're in the car, we'll be just sitting here talking about things that are really going on.
Yeah, we laugh when we say we're both weird. Bill and I are alike and different in a lot of ways. And so I think that's why we're so compatible. And my grandfather said the best, compatibility creates great relationships. You know, you have to be compatible. You have to have the same, not the same personality, not the same identity, but the same values.
Right. And that's not even
character.
Yeah, and that's not even talking about the husband and wife relationship or the significant other. Yeah, these can be either your bros or your girlfriends or anything like that.
Your relatives.
Yeah.
Your children.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And so when you think about your identity, there's so many layers of it. Your personality, your character, you know, your self-efficacy, your self-esteem, your body image, the things you've been told. So what I want us to do is to really look at all those things and make sure there's no holes in those areas that life is seeping. You know, because the Bible says it's the small foxes that destroy the vine. And so the goal is not to be perfect. The goal is to be aware. The goal is to always be looking at myself saying, how can I get better? And one of the things I put in Tragedy to Majesty, which is the first book I wrote, when I learned to control myself, everyone around me changed. If we would examine ourselves the way we examine other people, we would be much further along in our journey, and we would be able to give people genuine grace, because we realize, man, as jacked up as I am, how dare I try to point something out to you?
So as we're talking about personal identity or discovering identity, it's important that we always try to give you some things to think about and to ponder during that journey of self-discovery, and even in a part of our just doing background and research on this topic and just doing some discovering on our own. One of the things that we came across was some questions. So as you have us in your ears, you can just ask yourself some of these rhetorical questions, and you ask yourself on this, with these questions, which one best describe your actual outlook on life? The outlook number one: I often feel that I have very little control over my life and what happens to me. People rarely get what they deserve. It isn't worth setting goals or making plans because too many things can happen that are outside of my control. These are some of the outlooks on life that you can have. Have you ever said any of this? Life is a game of chance. Individuals have little influence over the events in this world. If these kind of statements that you have or you can agree with or identify with, you probably have an external locus of control. Again, some of them, not all, are all inclusive. This is outlook number two, and this is for internal locus of control. If you work hard and commit yourself to your goals, you can achieve anything. There is no such thing as fate or destiny. If you study hard and are well prepared, you can do well on your next exam. Luck has little to do with success. It's mostly a matter of dedication and effort. In the long run, people tend to get what they deserve in life. If any of these statements you can identify with, you have an internal locus of control. So these are just some of the kind of things that you can listen to, and as you look at those and think about them and even replay them if you need to, just asking yourself those questions, because you may have some on both lists.
Right.
Which kind of goes back to what we said at the very beginning. You're not all of one or the other.
Right.
And neither one of them are good, neither one of them are bad. These are just things how we are.
Right.
That's what this is really all about. The more you identify and know where you're at today.
Because if you know your strengths, you can also know your growth areas.
Yes.
You can't just know, you need to know them both, not just one. You need to know them both about yourself, not other people.
Because this is going to even have an impact on how you cope and how you deal with as life events happen. So those are just some of the things that you can think about as a takeaway or even action of asking yourself some of these questions and looking back on it. Am I looking internally for those positive things, or am I looking externally at those things like I'm a victim of circumstance, I'm a victim of situations? Those are the things that you have to ask yourself personally, because when rubber meets the road and when you're by yourself, only you really know the truth.
Right. You know, one of the things I wrote down, it's your identity. It's my identity, not yours. And so some of the things that affect us is that, you know, rejection instead of feeling accepted, in bondage instead of feeling redeemed, under the law instead of being covered by grace, feeling as an orphan instead of feeling adopted. Those are just some of the things that we have to be mindful of in our mindset about our identity. And it goes back to your belief system. You know, your belief system can be, so when you think about all these things, you think about your personality, your character, your sexual orientation, your race, all of those things, you need to kind of go through and examine them. Do I have the right perspective in those areas? Because I see there's so much that's going on in our society with people struggling with their identity. And so I feel that if we would really focus on our identity, a lot of the other areas that we're trying to put the I don't know what I am versus I don't know who I am. Mm-hmm. Because what we are is preordained by God, and it's very obvious. And so we need to focus on who we are in Christ, our identity, our character, and not trying to focus on what we are, what's our career, what's my title, what's my role. But who am I? Am I kind? Am I loving? And to me, if I had to summarize, the greatest way to determine if your identity is healthy is how do you make people feel when they are around you? It's not what you drive and what you have and your title. It's how do people feel when they're around you. To me, I would say is the simplest definition of a healthy identity. It's because when I know who I am and whose I am and what I am and what I'm not, I can then encourage and nurture and foster identity in other people. And so at the end of the day, all the things that we have made our identity, it's more than a picture ID. It's more than a reflection in the mirror. It's more than your, stature or your 18-inch waist, because all of those things are going to change. It's how you make people feel. That's the true test of your identity.
And that's probably a good spot to end the show on. So we thank you for hanging out with us. We thank you for your investment in time. We thank you, and we will see you on the next episode. Just remember, we're stronger together.
Let's grow.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for your investment in time. Remember to subscribe to the show and hit the notification icon to be notified when new episodes are posted on the podcast platform that you're listening from.
Or you can always find us on our website at richrelationshipsus.com or our YouTube channel, Rich Relationships with Gil and Renee. If you found this podcast helpful or you think it could help someone that you know and care about, please pass it along and share it with them.
And also, you can always send your questions and comments to richrelationshipsus@gmail.com. This is a weekly podcast, and the new episodes are going to be posted on Monday by 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Remember, you're stronger together.
Let's grow.